Well, welcome everybody to our off-season edition of the 2022 Garden Hour series. Welcome. We've been gone for about a month, so it's nice to see everybody again, not only our attendees, but also our panelists. And for those of you who may be joining us on Zoom for the first time, just keep in mind that we are happy to take questions at any point during our presentations. You can put those in the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your screen if you're on a laptop or a desktop. If you're on mobile, you might have to poke around a little bit to find that Q&A section, but that's an easy way for us to keep track of the questions. And then keep an eye on the chat because that's where we'll throw some links and other information. If you're having any technical difficulties, you can always shoot us a message privately in the chat as well, and we will try to help you out. But again, welcome to the October edition of Garden Hour. My name is Dr. Amanda Bachman. I'm the Pesticide Education and Urban Entomology Field Specialist for SDSU Extension. I'm based here in Pierre, and it's finally stopped raining. We had a very good mushroom weather day. It was awesome. I'm really crossing my fingers. I don't have to mow my grass again. But I am joined tonight by a full slate of panelists. We have Dr. Kristine Lang, who is one of our horticulture professors on campus in Brookings. And Kristine, what are you going to cover for us tonight?
Well, it wouldn't be Garden Hour if I didn't share a few photos from my own garden and from the field trials. So I'm going to be giving some fall ideas, and I've got a little bit of a frost warning. And thanks to those of you who are joining us from previous episodes, and welcome to anyone who's new in the audience.
Yeah, and if you ever want to catch up on what we talked about previously, all of our episodes from the summer are up on the YouTube channel. And I will also be sharing pictures of my garden, but they look a little bit not very kempt, but there's a reason for that. We also have Dr. Rhoda Burrows, another one of our horticulture professors who's out in Rapid City from the west side of the state. So Rhoda, what are you covering this evening?
I'm going to be talking about how to keep all those wonderful produce that you have harvested for as long as you can, so that you can spread out your local food eating.
Yes, because nobody just wants to be eating pumpkin from now until the end of time. You want to pace that a little bit before you turn slightly orange. And we also have a new face joining us to not only SDSU, but also Garden Hour. Dr. Madalyn Shires is our Plant Pathology State Specialist based on campus in Brookings. And Maddie, welcome to Garden Hour. And what are you going to be covering this evening?
Yeah, so hi everyone. Tonight I'm going to kind of follow up on what Rhoda talks about, except I'm going to tell you how to take care of any plant diseases that you may have seen in late summer, early fall, and talk about how to do some proper sanitation to make sure that you don't have any plant diseases pop back up on your produce for 2023.
That sounds great, and probably is going to be in opposition to some of the advice I'll be giving people on what to leave up for their insects. So pick your side, everybody. Bugs or diseases. It'll be great. But with that, again, throw us any questions in the Q&A. I will field them to each presenter after their segment, and then we'll also do another wrap up at the end. But I will turn it over to Dr. Lang.
All right. Good evening once again, everyone. It definitely feels weird to be doing Garden Hour and the sun is almost set already, but it's a good indication that fall is upon us. Those shorter days are one of the things that trigger our fall mum production for all of those beautiful bloom sets. Some of you might have some hardy mums in your gardens already. A popular series in this part of the world is the Mammoth series. Those were developed by the University of Minnesota, and they're a beautiful perennial cold hardy mum, and they come in a wide variety of colors. One that's pictured here in the upper right-hand corner, I believe that's like a quill yellow. Now I'm doing a really poor job of remembering the exact name, but I know it's in the Mammoth series, and it has that lovely little quill-shaped petal. Of course, you can't go to a grocery store, a garden center, or a fall festival without seeing pumpkins or lots and lots and lots of different kinds of mums. Many of the mums that we see for sale at some of our larger box stores, things like that, look absolutely gorgeous. I swapped a bunch of them out in my garden. For those of you who've been tuning in all year, you may remember that this was things like nasturtium, and in the spring it was pansies and snapdragons, but I did pull all of that out and replace it with mums. But I am willing to bet my cat that those are not going to be winter hardy, even if they weren't on my second story balcony. So just remember, you know, if you want to try a fun experiment and see if anything comes back in the spring, you can always take those mums, plant them out in the garden, you know, now or as they're getting done blooming. But boy, I'm not going to make any guarantees that they're going to be winter hardy for you. So if you're looking for perennial mums for the garden that are going to come back year after year, definitely visit your local garden center and look for something that's hardy to zone 3 or zone 4. And taking a look at the Mammoth series would be a great option. The rest of my annuals, the Vinca and geraniums decided to make a really strong comeback, and the verbena is not quite visible in this picture, but I have just this beautiful mound of blooming verbena that's really a nice pop of color against those mums. I'm really keeping a close eye on all of those plants ahead of the frost. They survived the first round last week, so we're gonna see how they look after that. And if you need some more ideas for you know, ways to spruce up your fall decor and some plants that you might want to use, things like pansies or ornamental kale would be nice cold tolerant plants. We have more extension articles with some additional ideas for you. All right, bulb planting time is upon us. I see, when I was passing by McCrory Gardens today, I saw that one of our annual trial beds, all of the annual flowers have been removed. They have the garden tilled, and they are starting to plant tulip bulbs for their spring tulip palooza. So this is a great time to plant bulbs if you haven't started to do so already. Sourcing bulbs, looking for disease-free bulbs that are large and healthy and not discolored, that can be really helpful, especially for things like your tulips and your hyacinths. Bigger bulbs need more stored energy and larger bloom production the following spring. That's why many of, you know, places like McCrory, or if you go certain places in Iowa that have huge tulip festivals, they actually replant new bulbs every fall so that you have the largest bulb for the best bloom production and the most consistent in terms of, you know, window of bloom time the following spring. Now, McCrory, they'll dig up their bulbs in the spring and rehome them other places in the garden, or they'll sell some of them. But just something to be aware of, that, you know, many of those bulbs will come back year after year. But as you start to get smaller bulbs that haven't bulked up as large, you might start to see a decrease in bloom production. We often think of tulips, fall is for planting tulips, but the great news in South Dakota is we have a lot of other really beautiful blooms that can be planted as bulbs in the fall. Things such as crocus, which is the upper left-hand photo. Crocus is one of my favorite flowers. I just absolutely love those purple blooms and that bright cheery yellow middle. They're a very early spring flower. Glory of the Snow, it's Chinodoxa. That was a newer one for me when I moved to South Dakota. So I kind of thank Kristine Lang for showing me that one, and it's now become one of my favorites. Many of you probably love hyacinths. They have a beautiful odor, and daffodils do really, really well in the Brookings area and other parts of the state. And of course, that's a nice, bright, cheery bloom as well. Some of these bulbs are a lot smaller than others. So something like a tulip, you might be planting that 4 to 8 inches deep. A lot of people kind of go with that average of 6. And some of these other bulbs you would be planting smaller. So a good rule of thumb is 2 to 3 times the width of the bulb, you know, the diameter width, is the depth that you should be planting. And again, you want those bulbs in the ground as these soil temperatures are cooling. Now is a great time to do that, because we still want 6 to 8 weeks before freeze, because even though we're not going to see anything above the soil, those bulbs are starting to put roots down into the ground. If you have any concerns about overwintering, if it's a really exposed area and you're like, you know what, I never get a lot of snowfall in this area, or it doesn't stick, it just blows away, you may consider 2 to 3 inches of a straw or leaf mulch. That would be helpful for the bulb production or protection. So all of this is kind of leading up to that doomy, gloomy question: are you ready for frost? Here in Brookings, we had to ask ourselves that last week already. I was out doing my last trial evaluations at McCrory on Tuesday, rushing to get it done ahead of the frost. I don't know if anyone else was watching the weather, but the prediction kept getting colder, and then they finally did issue a frost warning. Some people got hit, some people didn't. It was patchy. Low places in the garden might have gotten hit worse. On our research fields, we thought everything was going to be fine. And then we went out, and sure enough, the peppers, so our pepper trial and our zinnia cut flower trial, they were done for the season. The broccoli looked fine, didn't care at all. The snapdragons looked fine, and the tomatoes were still okay. But we had harvested all of the pepper fruit on Monday. And in our research lab, we do collect whole pepper plants to dry and weigh and understand how much plant biomass they accumulated. That data collection was just a little trickier because they had started to shrivel up and go downhill. And these symptoms on the plant material are sometimes described as water soaking, where the leaves start to look kind of greasy or oily or weird, and that can be one response to cold damage. If you want to know more about the first frost dates and then those harder freeze temperatures, 28 degrees and colder, there's a whole slew of new maps made by Laura Edwards and a graduate student, Brett Lang, that have been updated with the most recent data. So you can look at those maps and get a sense of when these dates are expected in your region. And as many of you on the call already know, we are looking at a pretty hard frost. I've seen, I think, as low as 26 degrees for the prediction Thursday night going into Friday morning. So if you've got warm season flowers you love, cut them, put them in a vase, enjoy them one last time, bring them in for a few days if you're diehard. Get your tomatoes and peppers and basil and things picked if you haven't done so already. And I think later this week is going to be a reminder that fall is really here. And with that, if you're picking all of that produce and you've got a bunch of green tomatoes, of course, there are recipes and ways to eat green tomatoes. Our colleagues in the nutrition side of things just helped add to an article about how to handle those green tomatoes, and they've got a couple of great recipes. One of them involves pie. I'm pretty keen to try it. And the other thing you can do with green tomatoes, if you've got patience and some time and some space, is do single layers, cover the tomatoes with newspaper. Direct light is not going to help. It could actually be detrimental. So getting those tomatoes into a space where they're out of direct sunlight, covered with newspaper, maybe 3 layers deep maximum, so they don't start to squish each other, and they will really slowly start to ripen. If you have a couple of bananas or a couple of ripe red tomatoes that you could maybe tuck in among those green tomatoes, as long as they're not going to get moldy or nasty, they are going to be giving off more ethylene that would aid in that natural ripening process. Rhoda, do you want to jump in? Anything else you want to share about green tomatoes or tips and tricks for how to ripen them?
I'm going to show a slide with that, so we'll.
Okay, excellent.
We can hand off.
Beautiful. All right, so we'll pause. That's the teaser for Rhoda. I think I'm just going to talk about a few events and then we'll hand it over. All right, so speaking of events, I don't know if anyone on the call has young people in their life or colleagues that like to do fun things, but I just want to share that we are in the middle of the South Dakota Crunch Off. And this event is all about getting South Dakotans, and especially children, youth, students. I'm doing this with my college students, getting folks to try a local vegetable, especially something crunchy like an apple or a carrot, or in this case, broccoli. You can see it went over really well with my dog. So again, just a great way to build awareness about local foods, and it's a great time of year to be enjoying all of that local produce. And it's a great kickoff to Farm to School Month, which we are in right now in October. If you're looking for something to do this weekend, and some of you might have a long weekend on your hands, it is the McCrory Gardens Fall Festival. So you can bring your dog. There's going to be fall floral arranging, horse-drawn hay rides. The trees are really starting to turn here in Brookings, so I think it's going to be absolutely beautiful in the Arboretum and in the formal gardens. And who doesn't love free admission? That's a great day and great event for the whole family. And since I won't see you again before this event happens, if you're out West River, we'd love to see you in person at the South Dakota Local Foods Conference. I can say with confidence that Rhoda and I will for sure be there. And I'm guessing you're going to see a few other Garden Hour faces in person at that event as well. And so there are going to be especially crop farmer speakers, people talking about high tunnels, talking about cover crops, talking about seed saving and indigenous food initiatives. There's going to be an awesome local foods dinner. So if you want to learn more about that event or get registered, I'd encourage you to visit southdakota.localfoods.org. And with that, are there any questions for me, Amanda?
Well, the one question we have involves wanting to kill some dogwood. So I was gonna possibly throw that to both you and Rhoda and see who wanted it. The question, and it's also maybe a little bit me because they're talking about Roundup. They want to kill some dogwood, and if they use Roundup, will it translocate and harm the nearby trees? And my best answer is you absolutely have to read the label of whatever product you are using. There are so many Roundup products out there that I can't give you sort of I can't give you better advice than read the label and do what it says.
Now, the only thing I can add from some experiences in my own garden is we've cut shrubs all the way down, and then we've dabbed using like a paintbrush or something smaller. You have like a little can, don't use like a food can to store it in, but something that no one is ever going to drink out of or use ever again. But we'll dip a paintbrush in that and dab the cut stems so that it'll translocate in the plant and kill off the rest of the plant. But then there'd be no danger, or very little danger, unless you're like spilling the can or something, of overspray on the grass or the nearby trees. Rhoda, other things to add on that one?
I would agree with you. That was going to be my strategy. And again, like Amanda says, some of the labels will actually give directions for doing that paint job.
Yeah, it is sometimes called painting. Painting it on the cut stem versus spraying it. So yeah, always check your label.
Yes.
All right, we will move on to Rhoda.
Oops, I got the wrong one there. Let's try that again. My hand got excited. Okay.
All right, looks good.
Thank you. So talking about ripening tomatoes off the vine, Kristine shared some very good tips about using bananas, or you can use an apple. And again, to make the point of direct sunlight doesn't actually help ripen anything. It can often cause sunburn instead. So I've been seeing some advice online of ripening squash by setting it out in the sun. It needs the temperature, it doesn't need the sunlight for ripening. And then mostly I showed this slide because I found this picture of another way to ripen tomatoes, and that's to pick up the whole vine, pluck it out of the soil and hang it upside down if you got lots of room in a warm place. And supposedly you get a little more flavor if you do this, but whether or not that's the case, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's something to try. Just some reminders that apple or pear or banana that emits that ripening compound can make some problems if you put other produce in with it. Lettuce can get brown spots. You see the brown there on the bottom. Broccoli can turn yellow and get off flavors. Cucumbers and summer squash may turn yellow and have shortened storage life. Carrots can turn bitter tasting if you've got them stored right next to your apples. And it may cause potatoes and onions to sprout. So you really kind of want to at least make sure they're bagged separately if you can't get much. If you've got a small refrigerator, keep them both bags so you can try to minimize the ethylene transfer. It's that time of year when people are asking, can I harvest my winter squash and pumpkins? And we're only supposed to get down to 37 Thursday night. So I'm sure some of the outlying areas will get a lot cooler than that. But winter squash and pumpkins can take it down to about 28, maybe 26 degrees, but a hard frost really is not good for them. And so you want to harvest those and bring them in. If they're not going to be frosted, or you're able to protect them with a blanket or something, the best time to harvest them is when they've hardened off, literally. If you take your fingernail and press it into the squash, it should not penetrate easily. And that's actually a good thing to test when you're buying pumpkins at the store too. Don't do it right on the top where everybody sees it, but turn it over and see if you can penetrate the rind with your fingernail. If you can, it's probably not going to last as long. So acorn squash, look for the orange ground spot on the bottom side of it. Most winter squash, this is not true of summer squash, but most winter squash will ripen further after picking, so it develops better flavors. Acorn squash, that's not so much true of. It's a shorter lived one, so you probably don't want to keep it more than a week or two. But butternut is actually, butternut pictured here in the lower picture, is usually best a couple months after harvest. Some of the sugars develop over time. So some tips for keeping the winter squash and pumpkins for a longer period of time is, first of all, don't yank it from the vine, cut it. Cut through the stem. If you yank that stem off, that's a place where bacteria and fungi can get in and start rotting the fruit. So you want to cut it. If you've got some place that you can keep at 80 to 85 degrees for a couple weeks, maybe you've got an old storage oven or a greenhouse or something that will stay that temperature, that will help harden up that rind if it wasn't all the way hardened when you harvested it. And then for longer term storage, the ideal is 50 to 60 degrees. So on your basement floor, if you've got a cellar. And again, you don't want to store them near apples because that will decrease their storage life. Potatoes, we talked about this a little earlier in the year, but I thought I'd just review it again. In harvesting potatoes, and again, you want to kill off the top. So, frost will do it for you if you want. If it's going to stay relatively warm after, if it gets really cold, you wouldn't want to do this, but you can allow the frost to kill the vines. For those of us, the frost isn't going to get, for those of us that aren't going to be frosted, probably our potato vines are already starting to die down. If not, you can actually take out your frustrations on them and beat them up if you want, or take a flame to them if you like doing flamethrowers. But be careful because we are under high fire danger. And then if you're able to do this, dig the potatoes a week or two after the tops die. If the soil isn't getting too cold, just leave them there, come back in and dig them in a couple of weeks. That will allow the skins to set so that they will stay for much longer in storage. And then you cure potatoes by storing in a dark but well ventilated area. Well, that's true for storage as well. At a cool room temperature, so like 60 degrees or so, if you've got something like that, 60 to 65, and then move them to a cooler spot if you have that available 40 to 50 degrees would be ideal, excuse me, in relatively high humidity. And of course, remember, potatoes always need to be kept in a dark area or they'll turn green and develop toxins that are actually quite poisonous. And again, don't store potatoes near apples because your potatoes may try to go ahead and sprout. And then finally, if you've got some decorative corn or popcorn, you can wait. You can leave those out there. They freeze, that's fine. Wait till the husks are dry to harvest, and then put them in a well-ventilated place for a week or two. Make sure that they're not piled up together so they've got lots of airflow around those kernels. And then if you're keeping popcorn, you can shell it and keep it in an airtight container. And that's what I have for tonight. And I don't see any questions.
Yeah, I do not see any questions for you either, but we'll keep an eye out. And if anyone does have questions, throw those into the Q&A and we will definitely catch them at the end. But for now, we'll go ahead and move on to Dr. Shires.
Okay, hopefully my screen is showing up.
Yep, it looks good.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to quickly introduce myself and kind of tell you what I do for SDSU. As Amanda mentioned, I'm very new to South Dakota State. I just started in August. I moved to South Dakota from Washington. My position as a plant pathologist is more focused in row crops. However, I want to make sure that I work on both horticultural and row crop diseases. I don't want to ignore horticultural diseases and just kind of help out where needed. So the other part of my role is to supervise the plant diagnostic clinic here in the state. So it's a great way to get a diagnostic done if you have plant diseases that are popping up in your yard or on your vegetables. Yeah, if you need more information about that diagnostic clinic or how to submit samples to it or anything like that, feel free to reach out about that. And as I said earlier, I'm going to be talking about some late season garden diseases that you might have seen and the proper sanitation steps that you should be taking to try to prevent those from showing back up again next year. So maybe, there we go. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is powdery mildew. We've probably all seen this at some point in time. Powdery mildew can develop at any time of the season, especially when the weather is kind of a little bit warm and kind of dry. It is most commonly observed in the late summer and the early fall, especially here in South Dakota. This is a fungal disease that starts its infection cycle by germinating spores on leaf surface. Those spores have overwintered from leaves that had powdery mildew the year before, so that's how the cycle continues. So as those spores start making this white fungal mat, and the mycelia starts growing on there, they'll produce more inoculum and it gets spread to plants and continuing the cycle on and on. One way to prevent the spread when plants are actively growing is through good watering practices, trying to reduce splashing, not doing so much overhead watering. But the other way to try to stop this disease from popping up again next year is through good sanitation. If you've had issues with powdery mildew this year, you want to make sure that the affected plant tissue is disposed of in your trash. We do not recommend mulching with that plant material or putting it into compost because it's really hard to kill the overwintering spores that this produces. So if you leave the plant material in your yard, it's very likely that the spores that that were produced by this will start your disease cycle again next year. So it is kind of challenging to get all plant material that may have showed powdery mildew symptoms, but just do your best to try to remove it and dispose of it into your trash. The next one that I'm going to talk about is Cercospora leaf spot. This is another common fungal disease that's typically observed in the late summer to early fall. That is because this fungus really likes warm and humid weather, and it can also move through water. So management for this disease is similar to powdery mildew. In the fall, you want to remove all infected plant material and leaf litter that might have had these leaf spots. You also, again, we don't recommend mulching or composting with this because, like powdery mildew, this fungus also produces spores that overwinter. One thing I wanted to talk about Cercospora in particular is whenever I found this leaf here, we also found several weeds in the garden block that also had Cercospora spots on them. So I would recommend, as you go through picking up leaf litter and old plants that may have had these leaf spots, that you also kind of check the weeds. Maybe also check around your other ornamental plants. Roses also get Cercospora really bad. So just try to survey your yard as you're going through trying to remove inoculum sources. So the next one is rust. So you may or may not have heard of rust before. One of the most common rust is cedar apple rust that a lot of people have heard about before. I really like rust. It's one of the first pathogens that I worked on a long time ago. So again, rust, like the previous two plant diseases I talked about, it's also a fungal pathogen. It affects many, many types of plants, just like Cercospora does. Rust symptoms can be observed year round. You'll see these spots pop up on the leaves. We're more likely to see them in the summer and fall here in South Dakota. The way that you can kind of tell that it's rust versus another leaf spot is each of these little spots are actually raised and they're kind of rough in texture if you run your finger over them. So we would typically call that like a pustule that we see on the leaf. So it's important to know the plant that you're seeing the rust on. So if you've seen it on sunflowers versus corn over here versus squash, you just kind of want to know the plants that you've seen your rust on if you're going to try to really manage it. Let's see, rust can affect all types of plants. So vegetables, weeds in your yard, row crops. And like everything else, best management practices are to remove the infected plant material whenever you see the rust to prevent spread. And you also want to remove any dead plant material that has rust symptoms because, again, it's a fungus, so it will overwinter and start your infection cycle again from that plant material. The next one is bacterial spots. So you may have seen this on your potato, or yeah, it could be on potatoes, your tomatoes, peppers. Bacterial spots and specks are problematic on many different types of plants. This is a bacterial disease versus the other three I've talked about, which were fungal diseases. Like everything else that I've talked about, you want to remove the affected plant material from your yard. The bacterial species that make these different symptoms, they also produce little spores that are going to overwinter on infected plant material. So again, we really want to do our best to try to get that infected plant material out of our yard to slow down that infection cycle and keep it from popping back up again. You can see bacterial spot or speck any time of the year, but especially in the fall, because again, that's when our weather conditions are good and conducive for it to show up. It only takes a day or two of conducive weather conditions for the spots to, bacteria to kind of get a hold on the plant and start making symptoms. Yeah, so again, don't compost these plants, don't mulch these plants, just you want to get rid of them, put them in the trash. It will be the best thing. So yeah. I also have a couple of diseases I wanted to talk about that you might be seeing as you're wrapping up the growing year. Tomato spotted wilt virus is one that's been reported across South Dakota this fall. It's known for producing these round spots on both leaves and fruit with the yellow or green halo on it. Dr. Rhoda Burrows has done a ton of work with this disease, and all of these pictures on this slide are actually from some of her publications. This is a viral disease, so we recommend discarding affected plants as you see them and affected fruit as you see them, because thrips are the insect vector for this disease, so they can pick it up pretty readily from feeding. And this virus does overwinter in many types of plants. So it's another reason that you want to remove symptomatic plants from your yard, because the thrips can move it from your tomato into an ornamental plant that you have in your yard. And then it will allow you to have that virus again next year. The final thing I'm going to talk about is fire blight. It's another disease that you need to kind of manage in the fall to slow the spread of it into the next season. John Ball and Rhoda Burrows have done much of the work that I find about South Dakota on management for this disease. I just kind of wanted to touch on it from a sanitation view. Fire blight is most commonly characterized by producing the shepherd's hook shape, which is where the growth points on the plant start dying and turn inward on the plant. Another common thing is these leaves that have died don't drop off of the plant. They will stay there the entire season after they've died. So that's kind of where the sanitation point of view comes from, is you want to remove plant material that's died from fire blight. You want to try to remove leaf litter. And later, whenever the plant is dormant, it's best to attempt to identify the cankers that fire blight is, the fire blight bacteria is living in, and do your best to try to remove those. And now it can be really hard to get all the cankers out of your tree. If it's a really bad infection, you might have to it may end up being easier to just remove the entire affected plant. Yeah, so there's a ton of different resources, and I've put some links on here. We have great fact sheets and great articles out there to find more information about this disease if you have it. And yeah, again, if you need anything about fire blight, I would recommend talking to John Ball or Rhoda Burrows. And with that, that is everything I have to talk about. Here's some references if you're curious about where I got the pictures from or anything I talked about tonight.
Awesome. We do have one question for you. If you've got powdery mildew and remove all the infected plant material, do you need to do anything to the soil?
As far as I'm aware, and Rhoda, Kristine, if y'all know of anything else on this, I don't believe powdery mildew will overwinter in the soil. It kind of needs plant material to sit on. But that's, if you can't hear my accent, I'm originally from Texas, so everything's a little bit different down there. So Rhoda, Kristine, do y'all have anything else to add on that?
I concur with you. As far as I know, the spores have to be on the plant tissue.
Yep, and that again, I totally agree, Maddie. And so if we're thinking about from an ornamental standpoint, things like some of our peonies or our phlox, like those are perennial plants that we can't rotate. But if you can at least cut that plant material down to the ground and get rid of as much overwintering plant material as possible, that could go a long way in preventing disease issues in the future. Also, if you're buying new peonies or new phlox, especially in the phlox market, that's a weird phrase, but
The phlox market.
The phlox market, because we're all just buying lots of beautiful blooming garden phlox. But if you are, there are some really beautiful plants that are now powdery mildew resistant that are out on the market. And that's a great plug this winter to look for the McCrory Gardens perennial trial reports, because you might see some information on that.
I want to know about the phlox black market.
Okay. Keep you posted.
Like, are we doing like phlox futures now? Like what is Maddie, if you can go ahead and stop sharing, I will share my slides.
Sorry about that.
Oh, you know what? We did have one more while you're transitioning, Amanda. Do you want me to read that one quick?
Let's see. We've got a neighbor with an ornamental crabapple tree, I'm assuming, because an ornamental crab tree is a whole other thing that gets scab every year. Peonies near the tree also get powdery mildew. Are they infecting each other?
So it's scab on one tree and powdery mildew on the other.
Yes.
As far as I'm aware, those are two different types of diseases. So more than likely, they're not sharing disease inoculum back and forth. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone though, feel free.
If you're phoning a friend, I feel confident in that answer. I support you.
And I'm like, I only took one semester of plant pathology, so.
In fact, there are very different types of fungi, so
Mhm.
and both quite specific to their host.
I was looking at my bookshelf. I do still have my plant pathology textbook though. So if for whatever reason I suddenly lose all of my horticulture colleagues, I can pinch hit. Please don't make me do that. Oh, this is great. I am going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint. Hopefully I can get a thumbs up from one of my panelists that you guys can see just my slide.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Rhoda. So yeah, it is fall and I am getting questions about insects that are showing up inside homes. We call these fall invaders, and it's a lot of insects, but there's also some other arthropods in there. We have these things that are going to be also looking for places to spend the winter. So much like bears hibernate, some of these insects and other arthropods are also looking for shelter to survive the cold temperatures. So if you are in a part of South Dakota or living maybe a little bit more rurally and you are surrounded by like soybean fields, you have maybe already experienced an influx of multicolored Asian lady beetle. So these are ladybugs that have lots of spots on them and a white M on their thorax, but they like to move indoors for the winter. Picture wing flies are another one that people are just sort of mystified by their appearance. This is a fly that its life cycle is actually tied to the plant Senecio, and you don't usually see these flies out in the summer. Like they're out there, but they're just not a really sort of distinctive insect that we notice. But we do notice them when they are coming inside and trying to then get back out through the windows. We have box elder bugs, which are, black and red, and they're just sort of this random insect in South Dakota that seems to occur in fairly large numbers, especially in towns that have a decent number of maple or box elder maple trees. And then another one that I get questions about are millipedes. These many-legged friends they don't have wings, so these are all doing a ground entry, but usually into basements or garages, and then they sort of die immediately upon ending up indoors because they need a lot of moisture to survive, and a lot of our interior spaces don't have, they don't have the moisture conditions. So these things are moving around, they're coming indoors, and everybody wants to know, how do I make it stop? And pretty much I I don't have, the silver bullet answer that is going to magically disappear these critters from your home. If I did, again, I would probably be in a different profession because I would have made a lot of money on a patent. But the best defense is a good offense. So check your screens, check your door sweeps, check your basement windows, check your garages, sweep stuff out. Check your attic if you can get up there. Those are all sort of points of entry. You're never going to find everything. So just know that these insects and arthropods, they don't feed or reproduce indoors. So they're just coming in for the winter. They're not coming in to make more of themselves. They're not coming in to like eat you or anything that's in your pantry. They're just coming in for shelter. So a lot of times people will do maybe a perimeter treatment or a foundation spray so that anything that crawls across that threshold, picks up the pesticide and dies. You still have to sweep them up because they're still going to be inside, but that's one way to kind of sort of stop them in their tracks and maybe keep them from getting too far into your home. For things that are flying, like the picture wing flies, really just making sure that your screens don't have any glaring holes in them, that'll help slow them down. But it's one of those things that some years, some places kind of get hit, much like those patchy frosts. Some people will see these in large numbers, some people won't. And some houses are just sort of more attractive than others as far as, where they're if you've got a southern exposure, a lot of, late afternoon sunlight. Some of those places are just a little bit more attractive and places where some of these critters will like to congregate. So there's not any sort of real simple solution besides just understanding that they're not feeding or reproducing indoors, and none of these insects or arthropods are any sort of human health hazard. So they're really just a nuisance. A broom and a dustpan, a vacuum cleaner, just as effective as anything else. So fall invaders, 'tis the season. A couple hard frosts though, and they will be out of your hair. Sometimes these fall invaders actually hitchhike on our potted plants. So I have a small collection of succulents that live outside during the summer, and then I bring them back inside, which I will probably be doing on about Thursday here in Pierre, because I think we're forecast to get down to 30. So these plants are actually going to be doing a little bit of a quarantine in my garage. It's an unheated garage, but it's got enough shelter that, they're not going to freeze solid. And the reason that I'm going to sort of quarantine them and let the pots dry out a little bit is that it's a little hard to tell. You might be able to tell in the picture, but I've got definitely some like webbing and stuff hanging out. These plants have been outside all summer. So there are for sure pill bugs, maybe some millipedes, probably a couple spiders. There's definitely some stuff in here that has been hanging out. So I'm going to let the soil dry out in the garage and give some of those critters a chance to escape in a place that is not in my house. If you have plants that have been outside and you also have indoor plants that never go outside, this is how you end up possibly bringing in pests for your other indoor plants. So you also want to practice that quarantine because you don't want to maybe be introducing like aphids or whiteflies to your indoor plant population. All about that sanitation, disease transmission kind of thing, not diseases, but like, critters getting passed back and forth between your plants. So just keep that in mind as you're moving some of this stuff indoors. You are probably going to have some soil-based hitchhikers. So quarantine them in a garage or somewhere and then bring them indoors. And then this is where I, differ on some of the sanitation advice. So obviously, if you've got plants that have been taken down by powdery mildew or any of those other things, those tend to be some of our like garden annuals, like things that you're not going to be keeping sort of from year to year. So go ahead, remove those, get them out of there, so you remove those pathogens. But one thing to do is to leave some garden debris for the insects. We've got a lot of our bees out there that are ground nesting or stem nesting. So they need some of that cover that's left by some of those dried out stalks. So this is like my little rough sunflower patch on the side of my deck. And I kind of usually leave that just do whatever it wants. The birds also enjoy the dried out sunflower heads. They like to eat all the seeds out of there. I will trim some stuff back just because it makes shoveling easier, especially along my sidewalk. But any of those stems, if you do trim them down, if you just throw them in your compost pile, you know, don't trash them, don't burn them, that can give some of those insects that might be utilizing those stems a chance to survive and then emerge in the spring. But some of that cover will also help to trap snow, which is going to be a good insulator for some of those perennials or bulbs that you may have underground. So you can leave some garden debris out there, you know, leave that habitat. It'll help some of our beneficial insects that are also trying to make it over, you know, they're trying to make it through the winter outside versus inside. And then, you know, it's spooky season. I am, in addition to being a wasp evangelist, I'm also a spider evangelist. Spiders are very cool. Fall is also a time when many spiders are moving about. As gardens dry down, you may notice some of these larger orb weavers that have been hanging out in your tomatoes, just living their lives. Any of the big wolf spiders that you find indoors, you can just gently, you know, catch and release, shoo them back outside. You know, they don't want to be inside really any more than you want them in there. But they're great predators. They're useful to have around. And frankly, my front porch has a bunch of spider webs, which at this point in the season is just, I consider it holiday decor. But you can let those spiders live. There are, you know, going to be some, you know, cobwebby ones in your house, but those are going to help out eating any of those critters that might have hitchhiked in with your summer plants that are also coming inside for the winter. So there's a lot of stuff out there in nature that also wants to get warm and cozy, and hopefully we can come up with some solutions so that they're not necessarily doing it in your home where you might not want them to be. So I'm going to go ahead and stop share and see what we've got in the Q&A. Ooh, can squash bugs hibernate in a garage in a pile of wood stakes? I mean, they could. Squash bugs. So one thing with insects overwintering is they tend to get to a, you know, they'll sort of, you know, slowly cool down, become inactive, and then they release sort of an antifreeze compound to keep them from freezing solid. So they are going to find some sort of shelter, you know, be that under, you know, mulch, under black plastic. If it's a heated garage, thinking about it, you know, that's going to be a temperature that the insect is going to still be active. So it actually may not end up surviving the whole winter because it's going to be using up energy, but not able to sort of feed on anything useful and get that energy back. So like plausible, but if it's a heated garage, you know, I would lean towards that squash bug maybe isn't going to make it. Where that squash bug is going to make it is, you know, in your mulch pile. So one reason why people, you know, even if you don't have diseases on your squash plants, why they might bag them up and just get rid of them is to remove any, you know, any of those insect pests that might be sort of like hanging on to the foliage, just to kind of, you know, get them off site. But there's no way to remove every overwintering habitat for a squash bug from your yard. You know, better thought would be for next spring to think about doing some trap cropping with those blue Hubbard squashes, or, you know, maybe delaying planting so that they go find your neighbor's squash before they find your squash. So that was a long way of saying maybe. But yeah, there's any other questions, or give folks a second if we've got any final questions as our panelists come back on. But I did want to let everybody know that this was the first of our 4 off-season garden hours. Our next one will be December 6th. So we won't see you in November, but some of us will be back in December. And then after that, it will be February and then April before we start our 2023 season. So I don't see any other questions coming in. I will just kind of go around, and any closing thoughts for fall garden cleanup. We'll start with Kristine, and we'll go in the order of appearance so everyone has, you know, time to prepare their answer.
There we go. I think for fall garden cleanup, I do want you to know, Amanda, even in my raised beds, I have a tiny little compost pile of the annuals that I pulled out of the one bed. They're kind of piled in the other bed, so I've got some habitat. And I call it my wildflower bed, which is, they're not all native to South Dakota, but it was a bunch of saved seed saver type seeds. You all have seen the photos earlier in the season. I'm gonna just leave that bed, probably not pull it out. So leave it as a perch for the birds, because in my household, it's about to become bird feeding season, which means I'll then be pulling out germinated weed seeds from my garden beds in the spring. But it's worth it to enjoy the birds.
Absolutely. Rhoda, any closing thoughts?
Coneflowers and liatris are going to stay all winter during in my garden for winter interest. Just a reminder, if you have a mulching mower, you can just mow your leaves and leave them on your lawn, and it will help feed the grass.
Absolutely, and it's so much easier than raking. Like raking is some sort of scam. Mulch your leaves. And Maddie.
Not much. Just I threw a link in the chat box for the plant diagnostic lab. So if you have disease questions, pictures, feel free to reach out to us. We would love to talk to you and interact with you.
Awesome. Yeah, the diagnostic clinic is a great resource, and that's especially at the regional centers. We'll send stuff there disease-wise too, because there are things that for identification need to be sort of cultured out, and that's not something that we can do sort of out here in our non-laboratory spaces. So the diagnostic clinic is a great resource, and we definitely utilize that as well. Sometimes the public might not see it, but we're definitely using them behind the scenes. So with that, thank you everybody for attending our October off-season garden hour. Hopefully you have a great fall holiday season, and we will see you back here on December 6th. So thank you everybody. Have a good night.